Hi everyone, we're going to begin here shortly. We're just going to allot a little more time for more people to attend. So if we give it a minute here. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael Adenovich, the Solutions Architect Manager for Cybersyn and your host for today's session. With me today and co-presenting is Nick Velich. I'll hand the microphone off to Nick so that he can do an intro.
Hey everyone, as Mike said, I'm Nick, and I'm the Services Manager here at Cybersyn. I manage the consulting team and do some consulting work myself. So I'll be presenting on the some of the technical and demo components later in the presentation.
Great, thank you, Nick. Really excited to present our three-part ITSM webinar. The first part of the series is based on incident management and how to build out that program from a process and implementation perspective. The second webinar is going to be geared on service request and that particular program. And lastly, a proactive change management program. So if you're not signed up for part 2 and part 3, we'll provide the link at the end of this session so that you can register for the remaining 2 parts of this particular series. Today's agenda, it's going to be, I'm going to do a quick overview of Cybersyn for those that are attending that are new to Cybersyn. I'll make it really quick. And then a quick overview on the newly released Cybersyn Analyst Portal Community Edition. And then Nick will provide some great information and a demo on incident management process and where that's realized with both the Cybersyn Analyst Portal Community Edition and the Cybersyn Solutions. And then, of course, we'll cover QA at the end there. Some housekeeping items. The webinar is a non-interactive webinar, so please do post any questions that you have in the GoToWebinar question panel. Nick and I will address those questions at the end of this particular webinar. If you stump us with any questions, Nick and I will definitely follow up with those questions. Today's webinar is being recorded for that you could view later or maybe provide to a coworker. Our marketing department, I think that they're going to post this out either on Vimeo or YouTube. They may do both, not exactly certain, but be on the lookout. I think that they'll post those links via email to, or send them out via email to the attendees. If not, Nick and I have that covered. We'll post those links as well out on the community forum, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So with that said, let's go ahead and begin the session here. Let's jump right in. Okay, a little bit about Cybersyn.
Hey Mike, I'm not seeing a screen share come in, by the way.
Oh,
if you're intending to share.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Sorry about that, people. My apologies. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, got it now.
Okay. All right, I apologize about that, people. Okay, Cybersyn started in 2012. We are headquartered in San Diego, California, with offices in London as well as Australia. We started our roots doing system center consulting, which then eventually evolved to developing software to enhance System Center, both from a analyst and a end user perspective. We've grown quite a bit. As you can see, we have well over 1,200 customers throughout 65 countries around the globe. We do continue our roots of consulting services. As such, we have logged well over 52,000 consulting hours. So we truly are the System Center experts and or consulting experts, if you would. 95% renewal rate. I think that speaks volumes to regarding the software and the services that we provide. Okay, moving on to the next slide here. So what exactly does Cybersyn do? Well, two things. One, as I mentioned, we create software. And we create software for the System Center stack, specifically Service Manager and Configuration Manager, to enhance those particular applications. Now, if we look here in the center, one of the nice things about our solutions is that really it's tying a lot of the Configuration Manager and Service Manager into sort of a single solution or pane of glass. From a service management perspective, we have numerous applications, and also our service management edition or foundation edition of tools that focus on ITSM. At the same time, we also have solutions for ITAM or asset management. And what's really nice with the ITAM and ITIL or service management, when you tie those together, again, it's a single database, a single solution, single interface, so that you're easily able to manage your service and asset management together in a single solution. And then we've also have our remote management solution, which is a suite of apps that really now tie into that single IT service management and ITAM solution now to provide additional capabilities for the analysts to improve service delivery. And that extension is really tools to work with users in Active Directory, as well as configuration manager capability. Again, all through a single solution, a single pane of glass, and really tying everything neatly together. And then if we look, we also have our Control Center application. Now, our Control Center application is geared toward customers that may have other service management tools, and that's fine, but yet they're leveraging Configuration Manager. Our Control Center solution provides the ability for those organizations to extend Configuration Manager capabilities and our remote management tools to others within IT, by far making them much more efficient and really improving service delivery. And then, of course, we have our free community apps, which we continue to put out there today to really get back to the community. It's one of the things that the Cybersyn founding fathers here, if you would, are firm believers in giving back to the community. And then lastly, like I said, there's two things that I wanted to mention, and that is that we focus on software, but yet we also continue to focus on consulting services. So we do have the ability to provide you that expertise in the System Center stack from a consulting as well as an application perspective there. So Okay, so here, this is just a few of our customers here. Two things that I want to point out on this slide. First off is that we are not industry specific. It doesn't matter whether you're in the education industry, the healthcare industry, or transportation, or what have you. Our solutions, our consulting expertise cover all different aspects and industries. Secondly, I want to point out, if you look at information technology, you'll notice that, and that's on the left, right-hand side of the screen there, Microsoft and Dell are using our products. So there's a number of divisions within Microsoft that are using Service Manager, and it's just kind of ironic they're also using the Cybersyn solutions to improve their service delivery there. Okay, here, as you know, and you've already guessed, Cybersyn is very passionate about Microsoft System Center. And with the release of System Center 2019 in the very near future, hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later, we're more committed than ever to the success and the growth of the service manager community. And as such, I don't know if any of you are aware, maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but on January 8th of this year, Cybersyn released its Analyst Portal Community Edition. And like Cybersyn's other free community apps for Microsoft Service Manager, this app integrates with Service Manager, much like our service portal, but to empower the analyst for a web-based incident management solution and capabilities there. So we're very excited about releasing the Analyst Portal for Incident Management. So here I want to cover just a few quick highlights of the Analyst Portal Community Edition. One, like I say, it's focused on incident management, and it is the full features of the Analyst Portal, but specifically targeted for incident management. And it does provide the ability to create and view and edit incidents, so you could completely manage all of your incidents there. These two bullets I'm going to kind of tie together, but you have the ability to, I should say, work in a streamlined manner with the way that Cybersyn's out-of-the-box views are for working with the work items, whether that be all of the active work items or work items assigned to a particular analyst or a particular support group. We provide a number of out-of-the-box views for your analyst as well as management to see incident assignment, what's going on with those incidents, so forth and so on. You also have the ability to list and filter on those views, as well as some advanced searching capabilities. And again, all these features and functionality are not something that's easily accomplished with the out-of-the-box console there. So very valuable features that we're providing. We also give you the ability to work with the activities, whether they be review or manual activities that are related to the incident, again, within the Analyst Portal Community Edition. Additionally, it comes with incident dashboards, so that this way management can easily measure the metrics to make certain that IT is really meeting expectations of the end users as well as the business. So you do have dashboarding capabilities to measure those KPIs. It is based on HTML5. Anyone who's worked with the out-of-the-box portal, especially the older version, you were dependent upon Silverlight, so this is completely based on HTML5, which means that it's 100% browser accessible, and we are device and OS agnostic, if you would. At the same time here, it is mobile adaptive. So that's a nice thing. Your analyst can work from anywhere or any device. And as we continue to move on, I do want to point out that we did make some changes to the portal. Anyone who has used a portal previous to release 8.12.1, especially the self-service portal, it does require a key to use on a long-term basis. The first 30 days were free. You can use the solution without a key, but then you needed to contact Cybersyn for a key. That key is no longer. So for the self-service portal, the analyst portal, if you have 8.12.1 or higher, the key is no longer needed, so do keep that in mind. That'll make things a little bit easier for you. One of the other things that I want to point out is that we did design the Analyst Portal Community Edition so that this way some of our full-featured products, such as our remote management and control center applications, as well as our advanced request offering tool, do integrate with the Analyst Portal Community Edition. So we're very excited about that. This particular webinar, I'm not going to go into in-depth at all on a remote management, but I do have a couple of slides to cover what remote management capabilities are. Advanced request offerings, Nick's going to talk a little bit about that in this particular webinar. Now, in part 2, Nick is going to go a little more in depth with the advanced request offerings as it relates to service request. Again, if you're not signed up for that particular webinar, I advise you to do that because there's some great information out there. So from a support perspective, the Analyst Portal Community Edition, much like our self-service portal and our other community apps, does not include Cybersyn support. So if you reach out to Cybersyn's support team, unfortunately, they're not going to be able to assist with our community applications. And as such, what we've done, and most of you are aware of this, maybe some of you are not, we do provide support out on the Cybersyn community forum. It's a great forum to post questions or look for questions that have been answered. People have posted and uploaded some code that they've written. So it's a great resource if you're going to need or require support. However, if you'd like to go a step further and actually leverage the community apps, but yet still acquire paid support through the support team within Cybersyn, we do provide support packs enabling customers to leverage Cybersyn support. If you're interested in that, reach out to us via team@cybersyn.com or reach out to me or Nick. More than happy to have that conversation. So with that said, I want to just real quick cover the remote management capabilities. And like I said, one of the things with the remote management application and the control center application is this provides a lot of applications, actually a total of 14 additional applications. 14 of them are for device management, and I believe 5 of them are for user management that, again, now pull in Active Directory, Configuration Manager in a much more secure fashion into a single pane of glass for your analysts to be much more efficient in providing service delivery. And some of those capabilities, as you can see, are really, it's a matter of deploying software through Configuration Manager, remote control capabilities, the ability to run actions and evaluations on some of the clients, as you could see here on the screen, as well as patch control. So lots of key things. Again, this meeting or this webinar is not to talk about remote management, but I just wanted to put the bug in your ear. Again, go out to, if you want to know more about remote management, reach out to us via team@cybersyn.com, as well as there's plenty of videos out on YouTube as well as Vimeo. So, also the other thing that I mentioned is the 5 applications, the user applications. Again, just a little quick screenshot, some of the things that provides: the ability for analysts to reset passwords, unlock accounts, deploy software to users, as well as tie into Active Directory for group control and adding and removing users from groups. And the nice thing about it is that it is all logged. So any actions, anything that's performed by analysts, you have an audit history or audit trail, if you would. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to hand the microphone over here to Nick, and Nick can give us a little help and assistance with processes and a demo of that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike. I have the mic, but if you can also pass over the screen.
Yep,
I'll get
that
my
I
screen
will.
up.
There you go.
All right, I have my screen, hopefully the right, yep, there it is. So hello everyone, it's me, Nick, again. So thank you, Mike, for that, and what I want to kind of get into for the second part of the webinar here is incident management and starting your ITIL journey. And some of us, many of us have taken ITIL courses before, or we're aware of what ITIL is, and some of us might have started on that. Some of us might not have. Maybe you're following it diligently now. Maybe it's kind of an afterthought. But I want to take a moment just to kind of, our starting point for an ITIL journey is first off classifying these different types of work items that we do. So you might come from a world prior to ITIL where everything was a ticket. A new ticket coming in for a new computer, a new ticket coming in for a broken computer, and it was all kind of the same. So the very first thing to do when kind of implementing Service Manager and Cybersyn and starting to adapt that ITIL mindset is to break down those different types of tickets. And Service Manager, they happen to call them work items. But the key takeaway is that there are many types of those work items, or tickets, as we used to call them. And so the 5 main types are incident, service request, change request, problem, and release record. Today we're going to focus on incident, and part 2 of the webinar is going to focus on service request, and part 3 on change request. We'll mention problem and release records a few times throughout, but not a dedicated session for those. So incident, getting a little bit more specific with incident. What is an incident? So one of our types of work items, and if you've taken any sort of rudimentary ITIL course or Googled it online, you're going to see something that looks like this, right? It's going to take you from the identification and logging step to categorizing it, troubleshooting, maybe utilizing other members of your organization, higher tier support to escalate and to do that deep dive. Ultimately, resolving that type of issue and closing out that incident. And the key essence of an incident and what separates that from other work item types is an incident involves something being broken. Something in an organization is not working. It's supposed to be working. It's not. And there's a disruption of services and in turn productivity amongst your staff. So someone's computer is not working. They can't do their job and ultimately do whatever it is they're supposed to do for the business. And it's distinctly different from something like a service request, which is just something that someone wants. Someone wants a new computer, or they want access to something, or they even just have a question. And so the nature of those two items are quite different, where you're going to have requests coming in every single day. That's part of what you do as a service organization, is you offer those services and people can request things from those services. But the incident side of the organization, we don't want those. We want to keep those to a minimum. We want to ensure that services are operating to the best of their ability, so that we can allow the different all these different folks calling in with issues to get about their day and to get their job done. We don't want technology or whatever we offer as a service to be not working and then blocking that productivity. So incident management is all about removing those roadblocks and getting people back on track towards being productive. And I know this is a very basic chart here, and there are, of course, there's some nuanced steps here that we're probably run into from a few times, and from the actual identification logging process, yeah, maybe we have a mislogged incident from time to time. We can certainly start as becoming ITIL experts ourselves, whoever's the implementing the system and kind of getting that culture established. And you need to start with some folks who understand ITIL a bit, and kind of trickle that into the different members of your IT organization. But we can never really expect our end users or non-IT folks, everyone in the business, to understand what this stuff is. So someone might create an incident and it's actually a service request. So first off, making sure that we're properly capturing these items that are coming in. And if something's meant to be a service request, we treat it as a service request. We don't just treat that as an incident because it was mislogged. Don't let that mistake kind of snowball. And then there might be, the resolution and the investigation, diagnosis, and escalation. Those can kind of circle a bit. You might have a couple levels of escalation. You might escalate, have the issue come back, or send that resolution back to the service desk, and it might have to be re-escalated and so forth. But ultimately, we work towards this closure step and work towards ultimately figuring out the issue, documenting that issue, letting the user know how to fix their issue or fixing that issue for them, and making sure they're happy with the service, the solution you provided, and ultimately wrapping up this incident and moving on, letting them get back to work and moving on to the next work item, whatever it may be for your IT folks. So that's all well and good. We've got the basic understanding of what separates an incident from the other work item modules, and in general, what's the general process we're going to follow to fulfill that incident, to take an incident from start to finish. Now, before we can do any of that, we need to make sure we have a system that supports it, right? We need to have Service Manager installed, following best practices. So by that I mean you need to make sure you have a properly spec'd environment, that your environment is broken out to the proper servers so that it can actually do what it's supposed to do well, that is host all these various different types of work items and CMDB and so forth that comes with Service Manager. So you want to make sure that you get follow that Microsoft documentation for Service Manager and the documentation in the Cybersyn knowledge base for our products. And then once you get that Service Manager Cybersyn environment installed, you want to make sure that it's configured to best practices as well. So there's some cleanup, there's some data that comes out of box with Service Manager, some like sample values and so forth. So for example, the support group field for incident, it's going to say out of box tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And I don't really know anybody who uses those values verbatim. So they'll switch it up and make them say service desk and desktop team and networking team and so forth. And there's a handful of other sample data that comes out of box. There's a request offering for literally every language that Service Manager supports, just like 30, 40 of them. Well, you're probably not using all 40, so you can get rid of some of those sample items that you don't need. Kind of declutter, have an environment that's ready to go, that doesn't have all that sample stuff that might not be relevant to you. On that note, I do have a quick blog post I want to share with you written by a consultant on my team, Jeff Ross. This goes through some of those kind of best practice cleanup steps that you can do when starting a new Service Manager environment, from cleaning up request offerings to cleaning up some of those templates. Enum values, enum's a fancy word for a list. Support group list is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so forth. So this is a great tutorial into how to clean up some of that data and get an environment that's ready to go, that doesn't have a lot of extra clutter in it. So definitely a good starting point, and worth a read as well. If you already have an environment, there might be some steps that you can do kind of retroactively. The ship hasn't necessarily sailed if you're already using it. So make sure you have an environment that's suitable. Management packs, before you're really creating content and tailoring Service Manager to your environment, you need to strategize a little bit. So management packs, kind of a strange concept if you're unfamiliar to System Center, name-wise anyway. They're just configuration files. So you go into Service Manager, you have a vanilla environment, and you need to change how something's configured. Well, that configuration has to be stored somewhere. So if you're going to add some list values unique to your organization, those would get stored in a management pack. So you have to strategize a little bit with this. So you have to figure out how will those management packs be named? How will they be organized? There's a lot of management packs that come out of box, and I'm going to actually switch over to my lab here and show you a little bit of that. So there's a lot of management packs that come out of box, and there's two different types. There's sealed and unsealed. We won't get too in detail with that today, but pretty much sealed are management packs that you can't change what's in them. They're kind of locked, and for good reason, probably a dependency of some sort. And then you have unsealed management packs, and that's typically the management pack you're going to be storing your organization's content in. And you can see here, I have a few Cybersyn management packs and specific lab management packs in here, but there are 193. And that's quite a lot of management packs to kind of keep organized. So, at the very least, when we talk about convention, we're saying things like, put your organization name as a prefix, so you can at least find the management packs unique to you. And when coming down to structure, we want to ideally store as a limited type of content in each management pack, meaning we don't want to just say, have a management pack that says my organization - all content. Then you have everything in one place, and not ideal because there's a lot of dependencies that can go on with that, and you have a little bit less control. Let's say, for example, you want to get rid of some configuration. It becomes harder and harder to do that the more stuff that's stored in one management pack. So ideally, you'd end up breaking it down by type. So in this case, I have an example here of, NJV is my initials here to kind of say this is my organization. And then in this case, incident is a little bit more specific. That's the type of stuff that's stored in here. And then beyond that, I have general in one and lists in the other. So it's really been broken down towards specific types of content. And you're going to want to adopt something similar for your organization. Ultimately, it helps with the elevation of content as well. For example, if I were to add a new list value, I can add that value and move that value to prod or to UAT rather than having to move everything. Maybe that's not tested or ready. So some flexibility there and having a good strategy for management packs. And exportable is a key word there too. You can take them from one environment, back them up, export them and back them up, or you can simply export them and import them into another environment. So changing things in dev, moving them to UAT and testing, then moving them to prod when they're ready, or even just having prod and UAT go back and match dev. Management packs allow for some flexibility there. So another thing you want to get situated before you really get into the weeds with ITIL and incident management is you need users and computers. So Service Manager has a pretty robust CMDB that is all these different configuration items pulled in from different sources, Active Directory, Configuration Manager, Operations Manager, or even just custom sources can be from anywhere really. These objects can be pulled in, and they're all centralized and in one spot, and you need those in place to interact with some of those other modules. So for example, if I were to pull in a computer from Configuration Manager, I might want to make an association with an incident saying that this is the computer that's actually having that issue. And it allows for a much more rich reporting experience down the line, being able to see this connection between your day-to-day computers, users, databases, software, and so forth, and the items that interact with those, your work items, your incidents, your service requests, your changes. And when it comes to importing users and computers, you're gonna do that through connectors. There's a few, every organization is gonna have an Active Directory connector, and most likely a configuration manager connector. So the old saying, garbage in, garbage out, is going to apply here. If you have a really messy AD environment and you point your AD connector just to the root of that and pull everything in, well, your information in Service Manager is going to be just as messy. So you need to be a bit more strategic with how you bring in users to your environment. Maybe target a specific OU, maybe make an LDAP filter to not bring in, elevated accounts or service accounts, certain service accounts or groups or whatnot. You can be really specific with what you bring in. So it's encouraged to do that. You'll have a cleaner set of data in Service Manager. Because cleaning up AD itself is usually a taller order. And then as far as computers go, typically bringing those in from Configuration Manager, you can target a certain collection. If there's certain computers you might want to exclude, you can certainly exclude those and bring in what makes sense, what you actually want to manage in this system in Service Manager. And actually, a quick small note with that: I typically recommend not bringing in computers from Active Directory, simply because when you compare Active Directory to Configuration Manager, they bring in the same set of data, with the exception, ConfigMan brings in more. The only thing AD brings in that ConfigMan doesn't is the SID, the Active Directory SID. So unless you need that piece of information, typically ConfigMan is a bit more normalized already than Active Directory would be. You might have some extra older objects floating around you might not want to bring in. So it tends to be cleaner to just pull from Configuration Manager. But certainly, if you have machines that aren't in one space versus another, you have to use that source to bring them in if you wanted to bring them in. So be strategic about it. Think about what you want to bring in, how it's going to be used, and if there's items that you don't need to bring in, don't bring them in. Don't add the extra clutter if it's not going to have any purpose. And then set up user roles is the last thing here to kind of get you ready to go with your Service Manager environment. So user roles are essentially going to dictate who can interact with what items in the system. And by items, I mean, you could restrict certain users to be able to interact with incidents or service requests or changes or so forth. You can also restrict their ability to see certain types of configuration items, different users, computers, etc. But make sure you have a strategy with this. What does your organization need to break up permissions-wise? And a recommended approach is to keep these simple. Chances are your analysts that are dealing with incidents are going to also be dealing with service requests. In fact, in an older system, if you just called them tickets, there's not a difference to you there, but we obviously want to move away from that. So you don't need to make an incident user role and a service request user role. You can have one overarching advanced operator role that covers all those different users, since they're going to be overlapping. So a little bit less overhead and management by keeping those simple. So assuming you get all these steps set up, and many of these you can go back and adjust. Again, the ship is not sailed. If you're already using Service Manager, you can still clean up a lot of this information. It's certainly quicker to do it from the start, but you can always improve your environment and get things cleaner. So assuming you get your environment set up with some solid practices, you should have a good system ready to support your incident management processes. And starting with this kind of chart here as your baseline, this is what we're going to do in the system. We have a system, and it's going to do each of those steps. So what do those steps mean? I mean, we see these. You can go do a quick search for ITIL Incident Management, and you'll see a lot of similar looking charts to this. But what does it mean? So identification and logging. What does that mean? What do we do in Service Manager to do that step of incident management? So this step really boils down to a few things. So how are these incidents coming into our environment is the first thing to consider. So your sources. You might have users calling in or walking in or emailing or going to self-service and reporting an issue on their own. You might have IT staff proactively recognizing an incident and getting that in the system. And you might even have events that are triggering incidents. So Operations Manager is an example of a system that can create incidents automatically. So if a server is to lose its heartbeat, for example, goes down, you could make an incident that says, hey, system admin, you just lost your server, go check on it. Next, we have methods. So kind of what is the way that this came in? It might be users or events triggering it, but does it happen through phone, email, portal? And when this information comes in, we need to know a few things. What are the symptoms? When did it happen? Who did it? Who is affected? Is it one person? Is it a lot of people? And potentially getting down to that service level is which user-facing services does this relate to? So where is that in the system? So I want to hop over to my lab here. And so here I have a existing incident. This is called computer is broken. And I'm sure we've all seen this lovely level of detail in our environments from time to time. So in your actual incident, I won't go through each field here, but you have for logging and identification and logging, you have your source field here. So your source, and this is really a field for reporting purposes mostly. It doesn't have any kind of workflow tied to it or any sort of action tied to what you pick here. But just understanding how items are coming into your environment can be an important reporting metric. So ideally kind of working towards self-service as that pulls on your IT resources as little as possible. So getting that source field filled out and then getting just the basic information captured is part of this identification and logging step. So getting the proper affected user, their contact method, title and description for the incident. That's all part of this identification and logging step. And if you have this coming in from an end user, you probably won't get some of these other fields filled out. So this is kind of step one of getting their problem, getting their issue reported in this system. And on that note, part two is this categorization and prioritization part. So these two steps, if it's an analyst on the phone, they're going to be doing them all at the same time. There's not really a fine line between these steps if an analyst is doing it on behalf of a user. But if it's coming from a user, they're going to log the initial issue, and IT service desk is going to have to put a little bit more color around it. They're going to have to categorize it, set the impact, the urgency, ultimately figuring out the priority and when and how should we work on these different incidents that have come in. So the classification part of the incident process is one field, nice and simple, this classification list. And these are the out-of-box values that come with Service Manager. And as I mentioned before, there's some sample data that's provided. And chances are it's not going to match up with what you need to capture as an organization. So one of the first steps I do in an organization is, maybe reference these to get folks thinking about what we could put in this list, but ultimately clear out this list and come up with values that make sense for your organization. I see a lot of folks trip up with the classification part of incident management. The biggest pitfall I see is trying to make a list that's just massive, like 200 values or nested 5 layers deep. And you got to keep in mind that incident management, it's a high volume module potentially. You're going to get, your service desk on back-to-back calls potentially all day long recording incidents. Hopefully not. Hopefully some breaks in there, but they don't have time necessarily at service desk to sit in here and take 20 minutes to make a decision on what this should be classified as. So you need to make that decision easy for them. So what I mean by that is have a simple list of 5 to 10 values, nice and clear cut what they are. Try not to have two similar values. Don't have a value for mobile device and then a value for iPhone, right? Because that, you could have a device request come in and it could seemingly fit into either category. You want to try to make it as black and white as possible. Don't have it be open for interpretation what category is best. So getting down to that super detailed layer is nice and on paper, but I rarely see that work out. So you got to find kind of a middle ground between that super level of detail and not anything, which is ultimately what's going to happen if you have a list that doesn't make sense. And there are certainly more ways that this is ultimately going to drive reporting, and there are a lot of other ways that you can get to that detailed layer if need be. So coming up with that list is certainly a challenge. One of the most difficult challenges, I would say, of incident management. And then impact and urgency are the next two that go into this step. So the service desk analyst needs to figure out, how is this going to be classified in the system? How am I going to determine its priority? And rather than just picking a value, 1 through 5, that's kind of meaningless. We want these to be straightforward choices. So impact is going to typically refer to how many people is this affecting? Is it a single user? Is it a handful, or is it a whole department, or the whole company? And out of box, those values are low, medium, high, and I encourage you to kind of replace those values with more finite values. A single user is, that's something that you can determine with certainty, rather than just kind of a gut feeling, this is low, this is medium. And urgency, similar concept. You want to make values that are a bit more tangible. So out of box, again, low, medium, high. You want to come up with values that have a little bit more meaning. A great way I see urgency broken up is, first off, a distinction between degraded and down. So if someone calls in saying my computer is slow, that's way different than my computer isn't working at all, or is literally on fire, as this incident is describing. So in either of those cases, it's very clear that the down case is more urgent than the degraded case, and it's a specific distinction you can make, right? It's not, this person seemed frantic, so I'm going to bump up the urgency a bit. Kind of assessing their situation, figuring out, can they still do work? Because incident management is all about this disruption of service and eliminating that disruption of service. Well, can they still do work, or are they completely stopped? That's part of urgency. And the other factor that I see go into urgency that works well is how important is this to the business? Is this a business critical service that's impacted, or is it maybe a less important service? So, if this is my main computer and the source of how I get everything in my job done, that's a bit more business critical than, hey, I'm traveling next week and my iPad's not working very well. Well, that's not necessarily as business critical, and might be a lower urgency in turn. So the values out of box, low, medium, high, encourage you to make more tangible values that allow that analyst choice to be less subjective and more, I know this is it, and I'm setting it, and it's a bit more scientific of a process rather than someone's gut. And now once you have those in place, you put those values, as you change those list values, these low, medium, highs will change to whatever values you set, and you ultimately have this priority matrix, and that's going to spit out a number, 1 through, it can be all the way up to 9 if you like. That's going to spit out a number that says this is the ultimate priority for this. So a low impact, low urgency is going to be your lowest priority. High impact, high urgency, of course, is the highest. Numbers, low or high, pick whatever you like. There's not really a right way of doing that. If you want to consider low numbers to be the highest or the lowest, whatever makes sense to you in your organization. But by setting that priority matrix, we take some of the guesswork out of it. And as we change these values, it picks the right value in that matrix and gives you better direction as to what incident should I do next. Okay, so you get all that captured. Might be 1 step, might be 2, depending on how that incident came into the system. But once that's done, you're going to start your investigation diagnosis process. And again, if you're on the phone and this is the service desk still talking to the user, you might have a first call resolution scenario here, and you might do this diagnosis as part of the same kind of blurred step. Or it'll go to another analyst, or it'll, you're entering it as an email, from an email, for example, and logging that extra, doing that categorization, and then you're diagnosing it. You might not be on the phone with them. So it might be a separate step. But at this step, pretty straightforward as far as how, you can't really dictate how you troubleshoot. This is all just coming down to troubleshooting, figuring out what is the issue, and digging into it a bit. But before doing that troubleshooting effort, you want to figure out, do we already have the answer in-house? So are there other incidents in our environment that have a similar issue or similar, or that have a resolution already that I can pull from? Is there a known error record potentially? And we're getting into problem management potentially in that space. But is there a knowledge article, a known error record that says, hey, we know about this issue and this is how you work, this is how you fix it? We of course we want to use that information from other analysts that have already solved this issue, not solve the same problems over and over again. So incident matching is simply looking at those other incidents that are similar and figuring out if there's a similar resolution to be applied in this case. And even looking at your change schedule. We'll get into, like I said, change management in the third webinar, but maybe there's a known issue and you have a change on the calendar to fix that known issue next week. You can that's important information to know when you're fixing an issue. Solving an incident is knowing when that permanent resolution is going to be applied. And of course, in this step, you want to figure out, if you do need to escalate this, you might not be able to solve this with the first tier support here. And when escalating, you need to make sure you capture that order of events. The proper legwork has been done. What kind of tools might be used to do this further diagnosis, and ultimately, maybe you find the resolution here, and you can get onto the resolution recovery step. You might have to escalate, and if you escalate, that escalation step essentially boils down to one field, the support group field, and potentially the assigned user field. So circling back to the lab here, so backing up for a second, the actually incident matching part, the step we were just on, you have plenty of different views in the portal that let you view the different active incidents as well as the recently resolved. And then you have the knowledge article section of the portal that would let you look up to see if you maybe have any known error records or so forth, so that you're not solving the same problem over and over. So a lot of ways to find those different types of incidents. There's also some dashboards built in that can help you look at that kind of those types of trends to see if there's something, work item trend, for example, to see if there's something similar you can pull from. Now, when you get to the escalation step, let's say that this is a new issue or just an issue that you can't solve in tier 1. The escalation step is literally just changing the support group, potentially checking this escalated checkbox, which is really it's just meant for reporting purposes, and I've seen lots of organizations spawn some automation off of that, but just out of box, that checkbox doesn't trigger anything necessarily, but you might make it part of your process to make sure it's checked, and so that you might have views that look at certain escalated incidents versus non-escalated, for example. So typically we don't recommend using the assigned to field when passing from support group to support group. Good practice to let that support group manage its assignments themselves. They know their group's availability and expertise better in-house than another group would know it. So assign items to groups, let that group mentality work to your advantage, the extra redundancy from multiple people in a support group helping out. And typically just change that support group field. And something to consider too with escalation is, how do I know who to escalate to? If it's in this case a computer is broken problem, most organizations have a group called desktop. That's a pretty straightforward choice. But if you have a lot of different groups structured in kind of a unique way, you need to kind of put yourself in the shoes of maybe a brand new service desk employee and think, would this person know that an SAP issue goes to this particular applications group and this other issue goes to this other type of group? Documenting that and figuring out how that person can figure that out is important. So out of box, you can make just a knowledge article that has that information, and this is a very extensible product. You can add all sorts of customizations in here really safely, and you could have potentially an escalation task that helps you collect that information, send it to the right group. So seeing lots of cool ways of solving this escalation problem, but it varies from organization to organization as to how much of a challenge that is. Okay, so escalation, you're gonna have that next tier group kind of look into the problem more. Now with incident management, important to draw a line as well between kind of responsibility and accountability. So if you have any of those RACI matrices kind of drawn up for really anything, you know, remember, accountability can't be shared. It's the person who is going to kind of see this incident from start to finish, that user-facing person, and it's almost always, and according to ITIL, is that service desk representative. That service desk representative, we want to avoid saying, all right, I can't figure it out, so I'm going to elevate it to this next tier group, and I'm done with it. It's off my plate, out of sight, out of mind. You want to move away from that mentality. You don't assign items and have them fall off of your radar. You still maintain that accountability in the service desk. Those service desk individuals still see that incident through. Even if they can't technically fix it themselves, they're still accountable, making sure it is fixed. And so the fields that kind of align with that is the primary owner field. So according to ITIL, the service desk owns all incidents. So there's no accountability support group, because that would always be the same group that is the service desk. But you might divvy up the incidents within the service desk amongst different service desk people. So if there's a certain analyst in the service desk that's owning this incident and making sure it moves along in a timely manner, they would be the primary owner. And then the person actually doing the work, doing that troubleshooting or applying that fix, would be the responsible party or parties, the group, and the assigned to users. So it's important when escalating to factor that in. We're not just kind of punting items away and not worrying about them anymore. We're still maintaining ownership. We're just using another resource, that escalation resource, to help us. But the focus, the service desk, is still front and center with that item. So you might be a little bit circular, or with escalation, or it might go a couple tiers up. But ultimately, once you think you have a resolution, you get into this resolution and recovery step. So remember, incident management is all about resolving and unblocking that issue. So it might not be a permanent fix. It might be a workaround of some sort. You might figure out there's an underlying issue and spawn off your problem management process to do root cause analysis. But incident management, incidents they shouldn't be sitting open for months at a time. The incident should be resolved and eventually closed out when that issue is no longer blocking that person's productivity, that user's productivity. So you want to take this fix that you figured out, either directly or via the escalation process, perform that workaround, apply that fix, verify with that user that it's correct, and that they're back up in working order. That's the ultimate goal, is getting that person back working. So that might go back to, it might fail and have to go back in your process, or it might move forward and go into closure. So the closure step, pretty simple, permanently locked, cannot be reopened. So if someone calls back 5 months later with a similar issue, my computer's slow again, we treat that as a new case. We don't say reopen that old case and now have an incident that looks like it's 5 months old in our environment. The Cyreson Auto Close app is a free community solution that helps to do that closure automatically after a set period of time. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't seen that before. So that's about it with the incident process and where those pieces kind of fall in place in the system. So I'm going to turn it over actually to Mike now to say some notes kind of on some next steps here. And of course, if you have any questions, please do type them in.
Thank you, Nick. Outstanding information. Greatly appreciate that. So from a next steps perspective, if there are attendees that are not leveraging the paid version of the Cybersyn applications, you're focusing more on the community apps, I encourage you to download the Analyst Portal. So if you are looking to download that, feel free to go out to cybersyn.com and download that application and install it. Again, you no longer need a key as of version 8.12.1. I think we're on version 8.12.7 now. So there should be no worries if you're going to download the latest version there. As I mentioned, support is free out on the community forum. One thing that I did want to point out, and Nick may share his screen out for this as well, is that any of the content from today's webinars, as well as part 2 and part 3. The information and any management packs, along with links to the videos, will be out on the Cybersyn community forum. And I think we have a special location for that. So Nick, if you want to walk them through how they can find that.
Yeah, so we did a similar thing for the ITAM series, and just here under videos, we have the link to the ITSM journey 3-part webinar. There's a search feature as well if you wanted to type that in. But we will have all of our recordings across regions uploaded here. If you have any follow-up questions we don't get to today, feel free to keep this conversation going at the forum here. And there'll also be some supplementary material, some codes, some examples, and so forth. The slides as well. We'll all put in this location in case you want to circle back and re-examine something.
Great, thank you, Nick. If you can go back to the deck, thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned before, for those customers that feel more comfortable talking with Cybersyn support, we do provide the option to acquire support packs. Again, post something out on the community forum or reach out to us at team@cybersyn.com. More than happy to have that conversation and discuss the options that you have. And then, of course, as I mentioned, part 2 and part 3 webinars. As you could see, part 2 is going to be on service request and efficient handling of those, as well as proactive change management. So again, if you haven't registered for those, please feel free to go out to cybersyn.com to register for those particular webinars. So with that said, we'll jump right into Q&A. So if people have questions, we can address those questions there.
Yeah, so we did get one question, and I answered. I don't know if folks can see it, but we had a Brian asked, do you have a 3-choice example for urgency? And I don't have a three choice, but I do have a 4-choice. And like I said, I like to break that up between down and degraded versus critical, non-critical. So I tend to rank those. The highest priority would be down critical, and the lowest priority would be degraded, non-critical. And then the middle 2 values, down non-critical, degraded critical, flip them depending on your assessment there. But I like to use a 4-choice list. You could probably work that into a three-choice list, but depending on which of those 2 ways you like to slice it up. We also had a question from Chris. Knowledge articles for escalation process is a good idea. Do you have any other knowledge articles on the top of your head that all companies should have? I like to have the escalation process documented, knowledge article or just somewhere in general. It just has to be somewhere. You have to know, your analysts have to know how to answer these questions. So for escalation, a quick lookup chart for that is, I've seen that be successful. And even if you're doing like impact and urgency, for example, and those are your low, medium, high, kind of less concrete values, I've seen organizations have a knowledge article for those that put a little bit more flavor behind them. You might have like an SOP document type that, for incident that goes into paragraphs on what low means and what medium means, and that's fine, but you just have to make sure that your everyday users understand that and can make those choices accurately. And then lastly, Mike, maybe if you want to take this one, Carol asked, Analyst Portal Community app is the Cybersyn portal we've been using. I thought there would be a demo of this app today.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, oops, sorry about that. I'm looking for the video for that because sorry that we didn't have a demo of that today. However, I'm gonna look and here we go. I have a link, a brief link to that I will put in the chat window here.
Yep, and we can throw that up on that community thread as well.
Yeah, so we're going to do that. But at the same time here, I'm going to put in the chat window that link. Come on. It's giving me a hard time. Give me a second here. It looks like just copy this link. Shouldn't be that difficult. But yes, we will post that. But I want to put that There we go. Okay, so I just sent that link to you, Carol, directly, but for everybody else, I'm going to stick the link to that in the chat window, as well as we will post that on the community forum, where you could see the Community Edition Analyst Portal and some of its capabilities and features. So, yeah, you're welcome, Carol. More than happy to help any way we can. So it looks like that's it for questions. Nick and I would like to take the opportunity to thank everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing the team out on part 2 and part 3 of the webinar series. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Thank you all. See you in a couple weeks.